Paul Vallone. You are listening to Wilmington's Big Talker. I'd like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Saturday at 1 p.m. and each Sunday at 5 p.m. we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. In case you aren't familiar with me, I direct Grassroots North Carolina, or GRNC, since 1994, our state's most effective gun rights organization. As its director, I was involved in drafting and passing our original concealed handgun law. Since then, GRNC has gone on to engineer passage of concealed handgun reciprocity, our purchase permit bypass, Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground, the expansion of concealed carry to state and municipal parks, restaurants, public assemblies, educational properties, and much more. Grassroots North Carolina is exactly what the name implies, a grassroots collection of volunteers from all walks of life who share a common concern that our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms are being eroded. Check us out at grnc.org. That's grnc.org. Later in the show, we will be speaking with Professor Lei Zhang, who teaches chemistry and physics at Winston-Salem State University. You see, as I read Carolina Journal, the excellent publication from the John Locke Foundation, I came across the observations of Dr. Zhang, who was born in China during its Cultural Revolution and emigrated to the U.S. in 1994. He experienced firsthand how the Chinese Communist Party manipulated citizens to increase its lock on power and further subjugate its people. And having experienced that, Dr. Zhang is alarmed at what he sees from the left in America, particularly woke ideology and the racial divisions being exploited by the left. Dr. Zhang has graciously agreed to relay his observations today for Guns, Politics, and Freedom, including one truly worrisome conclusion. But first, this just in gun rights news. You knew it was coming. The Second Amendment is racist. Yes, sir, says Fox News. Quote, the American Civil Liberties Union faced withering criticism Sunday for claiming that racism is, quote, foundational to the Second Amendment and its inclusion in the Bill of Rights. The ACLU piece, entitled Do Black Americans Have the Right to Bear Arms?, declared that anti-blackness, this is a quote, anti-blackness, determined the inclusion of the Second Amendment in the Bill of Rights and has informed the unequal and racist application of gun laws. It goes on to say, and I quote, the gun violence epidemic continues to spark debate about the Second Amendment and who has the right to bear arms. But often absent in these debates is the intrinsic anti-blackness of the unequal enforcement of gun laws and the relationship between appeals to gun rights and the justification of militia violence. Throughout the history of this country, the rhetoric of gun rights has been selectively manipulated and utilized to inflame white racial anxiety and to frame blackness as an inherent threat. You just can't make this stuff up. The author has one thing right, which is not exactly news. As documented long ago by David Kopel and Clayton Kramer, gun control does indeed have racist origins, tracing to the 19th century effort to disarm freed blacks. In the excellent book, The Samurai, the Mountie, and the Cowboy, Should America Adopt the Gun Controls of Other Democracies, Kopel traces the history of the Army-Navy laws of Reconstruction, which denied blacks inexpensive firearms not of the quality of Colt Army and Navy revolvers in common use. And, of course, Saturday Night Special laws against inexpensive firearms, which name Kopel notes is a derivative of the derogatory phrase N-Town Saturday Night. But in usual leftist fashion, the piece takes the right facts but draws entirely the wrong conclusion. Instead of ensuring civil liberties are expanded to all, regardless of race, color, or religion, the ACLU seems to conclude that since blacks have been denied gun rights, so should you. This from the American Civil Liberties Union. Oh, and it isn't just the ACLU. Take this from a leftist online news source called Crosscut, and I quote, the Second Amendment is deeply rooted in America's racist past and fundamentally connected to the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others. Apparently that's now your fault. But to make this connection, one must be a strict constructionist, someone who looks beyond the Constitution's written word to the underlying motives of the founders. At the Second Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787, he goes on to say, Southern delegates were fearful the U.S. Constitution they were drafting would restrict their right to own, sell, and transport slaves. In response, Northern delegates crafted a document in which nearly 1/4 of the clauses appeased the slaveholding South, and the words slave or slavery never appeared. The Second Amendment was key among those appeasements. Who knew? I've certainly never read that in anything I've read about the Second Amendment. But anyways, ignoring for the moment the 1697 project revisionist history being thrust on us by Marxists, the leftist logic is once again that because blacks were denied the right to keep and bear arms, so should you. I say this not to highlight the left's dangerous and obsessive fixation on race, but to note that it is people that claiming to be for your civil liberties who are themselves working to eliminate your civil liberties. And it is you who must out them at every opportunity. Now on to a guy who really is racist. David Chipman, Joe Biden's viciously anti-Second Amendment nominee to head the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. It seems that this particularly nasty bit of work has stepped on it yet again. In a letter from all 11 Republican senators on the Judiciary Committee that failed to send Chipman's nomination to the floor, including, I'm happy to say, North Carolina's own Tom Tillis, they refused to send it for a vote. I don't know whether Schumer will actually bring it to the floor regardless, but they are now demanding another hearing, the Republicans that is, this time to consider his statement corroborated by multiple ATF agents, which said, and I quote, "Wow, there were an unusually large number of African American agents who passed the exam this time. They must have been cheating." Do not assume Chipman's nomination is DOA just yet, however. I strongly recommend going to our homepage at grnc.org, where you can register your opinion to the Chipman nomination, as well as the 2 recent ATF notices of proposed rulemaking. Now for some good news. In mid-July, a 3-judge panel of the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that a long-standing federal law banning the sales of handguns to adults under the age of 21 is unconstitutional, effectively striking down the age requirement of the Fourth Circuit, which includes, by the way, North Carolina. Once again, we are seeing the impact of Donald Trump's many conservative appointments to the courts. That said, however, the ruling of the 3-judge panel will almost certainly be appealed to an en banc hearing of the entire court, which, given the predilections of the Fourth Circuit, will likely be reversed. On the upside, that would position the case for consideration before the Supreme Court. More on this as it develops. Next, you can file this one under chutzpah. This from ABC News, and I quote, "The nation's largest gun violence prevention organization," they used to be for gun control, now they're against gun violence, "is stepping up efforts to address the scourge of recent shootings across the country as part of a new initiative unveiled exclusively by ABC News on Monday. Everytown for Gun Safety is delivering millions of dollars in grants and providing support to local organizations that aim to reduce gun crimes by tapping into communities most impacted by firearms. This new initiative, known as the Everytown Community Safety Fund, is dedicating $25 million over 5 years to gun violence prevention programs. The first $1 million is set to be distributed across organizations next month. Now, in case anyone is keeping track, that scourge of recent shootings and other types of non-gun violence like rape and aggravated assault has been created by the same leftists who are now proposing to use it to restrict your rights. Folks, this is a common leftist tactic. First, they create a problem, in this case emboldening criminals by calling every police shooting racism, demanding the prosecution of police officers, defunding law enforcement, making policing impossible, inducing thousands of cops to retire, go on leave, or quit. And by delivering a message to minorities, they can flout law enforcement because, after all, the only reason they were stopped is that they were black. Once the leftists have their problem in place, they demand that it be fixed, their way, of course, which invariably involves curtailing your civil liberties for crimes they precipitated. So the next time you hear a leftist spout off about gun violence and their proposed solutions, this is what I want you to tell them. Stop right there. I refuse to play patsy for a problem you on the left created. You know perfectly well that creating racial division and discouraging law enforcement with a defund police movement has caused violence of all types, not just using guns, to spike in urban centers almost universally under Democrat control using Democrat policies. You created the problem, and only you can solve it without taking my rights away. Thank you very much. You're listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker. After a short break, we will return with Professor Li Zhang and what wokeism is fostering right here in the U.S. My name is Paul Vallone. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. Regular listeners know that on many occasions I have said that woke ideology, cancel culture, and the intolerance of the rising American left is creating a totalitarianism in speech and thought that makes it easy for me to understand how the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia could kill millions of its own people and send millions more to re-education camps. Today we will hear from someone who has lived under communism in China and is alarmed at what he sees in the United States. Dr. Li Zhang moved to the U.S. as a graduate student in early 1994 after completing his undergraduate degree in China. He received his first master's degree in astrophysics from Florida International University in 1995, his second master's degree in mathematics from Louisiana Tech in 1998, and in 2000 he completed his Ph.D. in applied physics from the University of Texas at Arlington. He joined Elizabeth City State University as a visiting assistant professor of physics in 2002 after working nearly 2 years as a scientist and engineer in industrials. In 2005, he joined Winston-Salem State University as a tenure-track assistant professor of physics, where he is currently a fully tenured professor of physics. Dr. Zhang, welcome to Guns, Politics, and Freedom.
Thank you.
So, based on your experience growing up in China, what parallels do you see between the current woke ideology in the U.S. and what you saw during China's Cultural Revolution?
In my opinion, it's very similar. So, the first of all is the woke culture, the cancel culture. Is associated with the the freedom of speech, and also the provoke struggle and the fight between races. So it's very similar to Chinese Cultural Revolution. In Chinese Cultural Revolution, the people had no any freedom of speech. There's no any gun rights for sure. Mm-hmm. So they provoke those different classes. They divide people into different classes and provoke them fight each other and struggle each other. So the intellectual class people will be physically abused, even be killed. And also at that time, people cannot speak anything different from the government tell them. So this is the one thing. And I do believe so what happened right now in the United States is very, very similar because, thinking about this way, okay, so the bigger tech company block, so the free voices. Mm-hmm. And they try to take away the human's right, something like freedom of speech.
Right.
And also they try to attack Second Amendment for the gun rights in this country. So those people far left always create some issues about the gun shows, and then in their opinion, it's gun kill the people, it's not people kills people. Actually, it's people kill the people, do nothing with the gun. So in Chinese Revolution, Cultural Revolution, the people don't have any way to defend themselves because they cannot speak freely, and also they don't have a gun rights. So at that time, the people cannot protect themselves. So the people totally controlled by the government. So it's like, the government can slave those peoples because they don't have any rights. So in the United States, that kind of thing is just in the beginning. You will see more and more wars in the future if we don't stop them. So the freedom of speech is everything. If you don't have freedom of speech, you don't have freedom at all.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed, you had said in your Carolina Journal interview that you saw parallels. They divided the culture. The CCP divided people by class. Here they're using, the left is using race to divide people. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, exactly. So I say that because the reason it is, okay, so in this country, in the United States, because of a history, right, 100 years, slave people, slaves in this country. And so that's the reason, the far left people try to divide the people in the United States. They use the races, because races is even worse, in my opinion, than the divided classes, because classes can be changed, right? So today you are poor, so next day you become rich, right? For example, you hit the lottery, so you become rich people, you change your class, but the race you cannot change. The people cannot determine their own family, determine their own parents.
So what you're saying is that they essentially, because we are upwardly mobile in the United States, they shifted their tactics from using class to race, which of course is fixed. Would that be correct?
Yes. If the race is fixed, you cannot change your race, right? So the situation even worse. So in my opinion, so everybody are Americans. So we are Americans. Then we have different backgrounds, right? The people come from different cultures. The people have different races. So we are all Americans. So the people were born equal. And innocent.
And this,
so
of
this
course,
is the principle.
You mentioned in Carolina Journal, you talked about your critical race theory. Would that be, in your mind, the means by which they are applying this divisiveness in the United States?
Yeah, of course. So this is a critical race theory will divide the people in the United States. And even from very beginning, even from kindergarten age, right? So the teachers, like brainwash them, and then provoke. So people struggle each other, fighting each other between different races. And that will be too bad. I mean, for those kids, and when they grow up, so I do believe they will divide the people, and also eventually, will destroy this country, because we are the one nation, right? We have different races, we have different kind of people, so we need to working together. So the critical race system will divide the people, and also destroy the traditional value of America. Eventually, will destroy this country for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a very, very astute observation. Yes. Now, as a scientist, okay, what do you think about some of the more extreme woke viewpoints? We've heard, and I think you mentioned it, that math is racist, and I've heard what is now being called ableism, which I guess they call a perceived bias in favor of competence. Now, and that might be racist. What do you think of those perspectives, and where they will end up?
Oh, okay. So in my opinion, okay, so, for example, the math is not racist for sure, because in my opinion it is, okay. So math invented by human being. So we are all human beings. It doesn't matter what kind of race, racist people develop this math, okay. So math should not be counted as racism, and also as well as the science, okay. So if you think about math divided by, let's say, white people, so if this one eventually comes from originally comes from white people, you don't want to learn it. So then you're far away from the civilizations, because right now all the technology bases on the fundamental math, right? So even if math developed by white, so what? So white people also belong to human beings. We're all human beings. For example, different kinds of people have a different expert, right? But somebody is very good in different things.
But it strikes me that if we continue on this course where we are denouncing things like math, things on which our society depends in order to create safety, to create a civilized society, ultimately it will destroy civilized society. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'm totally agree with that. So we get to respect all the human intellectual results, intellectual invention, for sure. Whatever, so the races, for sure.
And in just a moment, I may have to break this next question, but in the interview I mentioned, you also talked about the impact of the Cultural Revolution on children. All right. What we're going to do, actually, I'm going to take a break right now, and we're going to come back. And you talked about children and the Cultural Revolution. I'm going to ask you in just a moment how you feel about what is being, I guess, programmed into our children, and what that might actually result in just a few years if it's allowed to continue unchecked. Right now, folks, you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com. We're going to take a short break, after which we will return with Dr. Li Zhang and what critical theory and other wokeism may result in, very much like what he experienced in communist China. See you in a moment. Sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. We are talking with Dr. Li Zhang, of a professor of physics currently at fully tenured professor of physics at Winston-Salem State University, where he emigrated to the United States in the 1990s and has lived under the Communist Party in China and sees considerable parallels between woke ideology and critical theory in the United States and what he experienced in the Chinese Cultural Revolution. Dr. Zhang, we were talking about children and what you see the impact of the Cultural Revolution on children and how you might see parallels to that in the United States along those lines. Please tell us about that.
Okay, so the children is critical in the future, because children is our future of our community and also our country. So what I can tell and what happened in China in after 1966. So the children get a big impact because of the Cultural Revolution. So that generation, including myself, because I was born in 1966, the same year the Chinese government started the Chinese Cultural Revolution. So our generation has experiences. So the impact from the Cultural Revolutions. For example, so in China, in the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, so who control the power right now? So our generation, or just a couple years older than us. So the people still remember, still remember the Cultural Revolution. They're still using Cultural Revolution as an ideology to control this country. So, for example, so right now the top leadership of the Chinese government, most of 80%, 90% are from, things like Red Guard and in Chinese Cultural Revolution. And if you can see what they're doing on the wall and also how they control the country, is totally terrible. You can tell. And also, thinking about what happened in this country. In this country, if we have, some kind of, ideology of critical race theorem or 1619 stuff, and eventually, the children from very, very start of age, they have a huge impact on them, and the temper the history, the people cannot understand real history, real American history, and also prevents people to working together in the future. And for example, so if you provoke those struggle and between races, and then in the future, so those kids will grow up, and in the future they cannot working together, they hated each other, and they're fighting each other. That is the very obviously negative impact for the future, and also based on the theorem, CRT theorem, if science developed by white people, so what happens is they provide other kind of race people to learn. So the science, the huge negative impact for this country's future in science and technology. So American right now so far is the most advanced technology and science on the world. So if the children start from very beginning, from kindergarten for K-12 education, they're using this kind of theorem, 1619 or CRT, and eventually the people cannot work with each other, cannot be learn real science because there's a certain kind of area they cannot touch because of the based on race theorem, critical race theorem. There was huge negative impact on this community, on this country. Eventually, will bring down this country, okay, for sure. This is in my opinion. So what happens in Chinese Cultural Revolution, the result is that new generation, control the power, but they're still using the same way in Cultural Revolution. But in China right now, what happened is very similar to Cultural Revolution. If you take a look at CCP China leadership, what happens in China right now is totally aligned with the Cultural Revolution, okay? So my worry about this is that in the future, if the kids in this country right now so be brainwashed those theorems, so eventually they will impact on the whole country in the future. Once those kids will grow up, so those kids will be gradually make a contribution to this country, to control this country. That will happen, very badly happen for this country.
I would wonder if perhaps that's not intentional, but I'll ask you that question in just a moment. Before we get to that one, we in the United States arguably have the highest living standards in the world. We've enjoyed the greatest freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, to be free of oppressive search and seizure, the right to keep and bear arms, to prosper in business, to secure for oneself and one's family a future. Yet there's a large contingency in the U.S. that seems willing to give that up. It's easy to see why a government might want to curtail liberties in the interest of greater control, but why do you think an entire generation would want to give up their civil liberties in the interest of socialism and woke ideology? Why would they do that?
Paul, this is a very good question, okay? So thinking about this way, okay, so everybody talking about political collections, right? That happen not today. That happened gradually back to 40, 50 years ago.
Yes.
And if you compare with the current day with the 30, 40 years ago, you will see there's a lot of changing in this community, in this country, okay? So I do believe the political collections make changing gradually, changing everything in this country, okay? So the people, especially for young people, receive education from K-12, from college, from college education. They totally haven't lost not totally so far, they gradually lost, American traditional culture, value. Okay, gradually lost it. So that's the reason, the government will be, gradually control everything. For example, that somebody far left right now is challenging First Amendment, right? So the bigger tech company can block free voices right now. So this is a very, very bad beginning. It's just the beginning. And also the government will try to control the gun, take away people's gun rights also included. So if we, so the people, if it happens gradually, the people will be gradually accept It's not like happen in one day. If it happen one day, the people will have awareness. But if it happen gradually, the people gradually will accept more and more and more and more until the people lost everything. So started from lost the freedom of speech, they lost the gun rights, and they were lost more and more. Eventually, this country was no different from China. The people will be lost everything. The government will control everything in the future. So this is what I worry about that.
That's the way I've portrayed it. This is a multi-generational effort to take over our cultural institutions, our schools, our media, and it's succeeding, but I think, but I'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, I don't know whether you're familiar with Trevor Loudon, and we talked a little bit about the Epoch Times before our interview, but he's often featured in the Epoch Times, and he's sort of their resident expert on the communist influence on various movements in the United States. And he traces many of the violent left-wing activists in the U.S. to organizations such as Liberty Road and the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, both of which he says are associated with Chinese efforts to undermine American democracy. Now, realizing that this is a bit beyond the scope of the last interview you did, what do you think about that? Do you think the CCP is capable of orchestrating something like this in the United States in order to undermine our Western democracy?
Yes, I totally believe that. You know, since the 1970s, and China, Communist Party China, and established the normal relationship with the United States. I think back to 1972. Since there, and China and the United States gradually exchanging. You know, the changing the culture is changing the value. And also Chinese government have some institution they call Confucius institution in this country, try to spirit their own value, CCP value in this country. And also the Chinese government is not only export so the cheap, better quality goods, okay, and also export some kind of a CCP culture, CCP idea. Very importantly, CCP corruption. Okay, this corruption, in their opinion, they can buy off everything. They can buy some politicians, right? They can buy some kind of lobbyist for speaker for them. They even spend $1 million for media, mainstream media. They make advertising. They're using media in the United States to educate the people, United States people. Okay, so they put a huge influences even for the last election. What I know is we have a Chinese social media, things like WeChat, right? So there's a lot of news produced by Chinese CCP and on the WeChat. Say we need a vote for Biden stuff. We need a whatever. Okay. So they even interrupt American election from last year.
We're at a hard stop, so we are going to take a short break before returning with Professor Zhang on how wokeism in the U.S. is following hard on the heels of Chinese communism. My name is Paul Vallone. You're listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. Before the break, we were talking with Winston-Salem State University professor Lei Zhang, who grew up during China's Cultural Revolution, emigrated to the U.S. in the 1990s, and now warns that wokeism in the U.S. is following the track of Chinese communism. When I asked Professor Zhang whether the Chinese might themselves be behind the cultural unrest we are experiencing in recent months and even our elections, he responded that yes, they likely are. Here we will pick up with Professor Zhang's description of Chinese efforts right here in the U.S.
So in my opinion, CCP put a huge impact in this American country, in American, this country, this great country. So they gradually were building this country down.
Wow.
So this is what I worry about this. Okay. So obviously we need to be we raise the precaution for those the impact from the CCP and socialism and communist idea from other countries. So we need to be in our K-12 education. We need to tell our students, okay, so 1776. We need to tell the students how great this country is. We don't let our young generation to hate this country. Okay, we don't let other people to tempt the great history of America. Okay, we need to protect our traditional value for this country. Be very careful, because if two cultures that interact each other, whatever good things, bad things, there will be, penetrate so this country easily. So easily can influence the people's idea, people's thinking. That is very dangerous to this country.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I'm gonna continue with this, and actually I'll have my sound engineer probably cut some of this out, but actually break it with two segments rather than cutting something out. But what I'd like to ask you now is, you had said to Carolina Journal that you fear it might be too late to save our society. Are we in fact too late?
Okay. So in my opinion, we are totally infected by Marxism. So right now in this country, okay. So this country in danger. This country in the age, we need to save this country. It's not it's not called too late. It's late. But we still have a chance to save this great country. So if we take action, start from now, okay, and especially from very beginning from the education, I think education is the key, because the young generation is the future of this community, future of this country. If we start from now, start from kindergarten to K-12, from college level education, so we still have a chance to make this country great again. So we cannot give up our young generation. We need to fight for our young generation, start from kindergarten. So if we can start from now, start from those young generation, this country still have a chance, still have a hope, still can make this country back to right track, in right direction. So it's late, but it's not too late. But we get to take action as soon as possible, in my opinion.
I sincerely hope you're right. I've been less than confident about that, but I very much hope you're right. So in closing today, I guess I'm going to ask you a general question that let you sum up what you think you need to say. But if you had a message you wanted to give young people in the United States today, the young people who say socialism as a system with all of its enforced compliance that it implies, they seem to think it's superior to the freedoms we've enjoyed for the last more than 2 centuries. What would you say to those people?
Yeah, I mean, what I try to say is those people do not have real experiences for those socialism, communism. They don't know how bad really happened in socialism country, things like China, Moscow, whatever. What I try to say is in China, 90%, 95% people, they are very poor people. And all the wealth, 95% wealth, controlled by 100 families, top CCP officials. They control everything. So the young people in this country never have experiences. And I hope that they don't in the future they will not experience that real socialism. It's too bad. Once you go that direction, you cannot go back. The cost was too much. So the only things we can do is so far is tell them the truth. What happened in China? What Chinese people without freedom of speech, without gun rights, what kind of life? In my opinion, the people living in China like slaves, modern slaves, because they don't have any right. And the CCP government treated them is not like a people, okay? They're not slave them economically, but also if the government official want to take them organism, they can kill them for sure for any time for for free, they can tell them and whatever they want to do from them. Mm-hmm. There's the young people in this country never experiences. So young people in this country, they're always thinking socialism is good. Right, it's always thinking about that. It's totally wrong. So we need to be, vote for our school board, and then educate young people within right materials. For example, 1776, and also educate them how bad, what's the results, what's the example for socialism, something like socialism in China, how many people were killed in last 100 years, and for innocent people. What kind of a situation for current Chinese people situation? So if the young generation learns about real socialism, so they'll be good for this country, because they will be thinking maybe socialism is not good as they expect. Mm-hmm. So maybe they need to change their mind. They need to be respect the traditional American value, and therefore they can make America great again. So this is my opinion.
Well, let me put it this way. I'm going to be putting your opinion out to as many people as I can, because I really don't think there is any substitute for somebody who has experienced what you have. And I think you're very much right that the generation that's now promoting socialism in the United States really don't know exactly what it is that they're asking for. Folks, we have been speaking with Professor Lei Zhang, who emigrated from communist China in the 1990s and has experienced everything that woke ideology and critical theory is bringing us to in the United States today. He is truly a cautionary tale. Professor Zhang, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you.
Elsewhere, the August 19th deadline is fast approaching to register your objection to the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, which purports to deal with the latest boogeyman, so-called ghost guns, but which would actually allow the ATF to individually regulate not whole guns, but instead parts of guns as though they were entire firearms. I defer to my friend Jeff Knox of the Firearms Coalition, who in ammoland.com has this to say, and I quote, "Time is running out on the comment period for the BATFE's proposed changes to the definition of firearms, frames and receivers, and the marking of same. In short, the proposed regulations would define as a firearm the upper receiver or slide of a firearm, as well as the barrel and possibly other parts, all at the ATF's discretion. As firearms, these parts would require serialization, maker information, and all of the other controls and restrictions currently applied only to lower receivers. That means you would have to go to your gun dealer and fill out a Form 4473 and undergo a background check to get something as minor as a barrel. The objective, of course, is to control and regulate the lawful sale of major firearms components and restrict what gun owners can legally do to modify their personal guns or to build their own firearms. The comment period closes on August 19th, and so it's important that you get your comment in before that deadline. The good news is that my organization, Grassroots North Carolina, has made it easy for you to comment on the proposed rule in just a few minutes by going to grnc.org, that's grnc.org, where on the home page you will find links to 3 legislative alerts, one to comment on the proposal we just talked about, one to register opposition to David Chipman, and the next to register your comments on the ATF's proposal to regulate AR-15 style pistols. Again, that's grnc.org. My name is Paul Vallone. You've been listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, where each Saturday at 1 p.m. and each Sunday at 5 p.m. we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. Please check out our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop, at hyattguns.com. I also encourage you to check out my website at gunspoliticsandfreedom.com, spell out the and, where you can find both my writings and earlier editions of the show. See you next week.